Hey everybody, this is Atesh and welcome to the first episode of Making Modern Metal Composition Essentials. We'll talk about what makes you special. Before we start, please hit that subscribe button as I release new videos every week about making modern metal. And differently than the Making Modern Metal Production Essentials series, I decided to go one by one with the Composition Essentials series. I'll pick one topic and get into more detail. First of all, we're talking about modern metal composition, but what we'll talk about here doesn't necessarily have to apply only to metal. Also, whether you want to be original or not is totally up to you. I think it's totally fine to replicate something you adore. First thing is what you listen to, unsurprisingly. We're all made up of things that we've listened to. And depending on the case, it could be a very weird combination. That was certainly the case for me. And I think growing up in Turkey was really great for my understanding of music. I think we're at an excellent crossover point between Eastern and Western music. On one side, we had the microtonal Turkish traditional music, and on the other side, we had the Western music. And in my opinion, Turkish or Middle Eastern or Balkan music have a very special place in metal. I will make a separate episode on that next, since microtonal music is getting a little more popular these days. But there are fundamental differences in how it's used in the traditional Eastern music and how people are using it these days in the Western harmony. So let's talk about what makes me special. So here's a short summary of my musical background. At an early age, I was exposed to very standard Turkish pop music that you'd hear on the TV and radio. And when I was still a kid, at some point it became clear to my family that I had a talent for music. So my mom made a conscious effort to expose me to classical music. So she got me a couple of classical music CDs, including Beethoven's Nine, Vivaldi's Four Seasons, some Bach, some Mozart, pretty standard stuff, and weirdly enough, some Dvorak and George Gershwin. And roughly at the same time, I was exposed to rock music because of my sister. She was pretty much into the popular music at the time, which was Bon Jovi and Guns N' Roses and Nirvana. That sure played a part why I wanted to play the guitar. And from that side, I got this other music that was really popular in Turkey, which we call arabesque music. Now, this music has a negative connotation, but there were some people in the genre that were really creative and talented. It's sort of a Turkish prog music with traditional instruments. And it's really different than the folk music or the classical Turkish music, which we call, in literal translation, Turkish art music, which is also a continuation of the palace music in Ottoman Empire. Soon after that, I started playing guitar, even though my first instrument was actually a keyboard, a synth. And that is roughly around the same time I discovered Metallica. Now, I should mention I'm a self-taught guitarist and a self-taught musician in general. I took some classes on reading and ear training, but that lasted maybe for one summer, if even. So I wasn't really at zero when I started playing guitar, but I didn't have any practical information or knowledge that I could use on guitar. So it was really like beginning from the start. I spent the next 7 years playing guitar obsessively. For the most part, it was like 7-8 hours a day. I learned all Metallica songs available at the time, then almost all Megadeth, and I went on this classic rock path, and that was for a long time. And I also liked the new genres and bands like Deftones and Korn and Linkin Park. But I was more interested in virtuosity at the time, so classic rock made more sense. And of course, in the meantime, I had bands and performances. I was in bands in my high school, and we were always in some sort of competition. Then it all led me to go study music for college. I got a scholarship to study composition, even though I had no formal training. I didn't have any written songs, and I didn't really sight read. I didn't know harmony. I only had songs. Maybe more complex songs on guitar, but still it was just on guitar. I spent the next 5 years in that school learning everything I can about classical music, a little bit of jazz, and a little bit of Turkish music. And thanks to many people around me, I had a lot of new stuff to listen to. So that is the core combination for me. From early on, classical music, 90s rock, heavy metal, thrash metal, a little bit of grunge, and arabesque music. Then from college on, more classical music, more contemporary classical music, some jazz, punk rock, industrial, electronic music, new metal, a little bit of everything. As lame as it might sound, I like everything that's done right. Then I went to New York and started living there and started producing fully by myself. And being away from Turkey made me realize how much Turkish music played a part in my musical character. So I started incorporating Turkish music ideas in my music. And not so long ago, I made this conscious decision to stop playing these old songs like classic rock unless I am in a band that plays those songs, because I was defaulting to those songs. And I generally do want to sound a little more modern. More on that topic on one of the next episodes. So those are the elements that I believe that make me a little different than other people. Incorporation of microtones and Turkish music in general, and a good understanding of Western music in general. Like I said, I'll do a video next about Turkish music and Middle Eastern and Balkan music in general, and how we use microtones and how we incorporate that in the melody, not in the harmony. And that's one of the key elements in my songs. Let's see some examples from my songs now. For this video, I only have 2 examples to show. Both are from my EP that I released last year. This is my tune called Hole in the Wall. We're taking a look at the main melody. Let's hear it first. Even though this isn't super microtonal, the melody is quite a Turkish sounding melody. It does sound microtonal, but that mostly comes from the vibrato I'm making in some of the notes. It is a wider vibrato, so I'm bending up to that microtonal note. This is another tune of mine called Jin's Story. Here the melody is quite microtonal. I'm not gonna get into detail now, that's for the next video. But generally, if I have something microtonal, I don't have any other note in that register, so they don't clash. In this example, I have a pedal point, and the melody is playing an octave higher. No clashing notes. Here the 2nd and the 6th degrees of the scale are sharper. I'll play it in solo. Pay attention to the 2nd note that's playing. That's the 2nd degree in the scale. I'm playing it starting 1 note earlier and finishing 1 note later, because the intervals also tell you it's microtonal. Here's another example with the 6th degree of the scale. I'll play it the same way. It's a very similar structure. Part 2. Equipment and limitations. Now, equipment also plays a huge part. Sometimes we don't have great equipment up to the task. But to be able to make that work in a composition or a production, you might try not so common ways, and that could be something that makes you special. You might have a guitar that can't be tuned super low, but maybe you try a pitch shifter that has its own sound, like Digitech Whammy. Or you might not have the greatest sounding synth, but by using outside sound tools, you might make it special. Whatever you have, you make it work, and that could be one thing that makes you special. Number 3, openness. I see quite a lot of people who are still living in the past and have a problem with the way things are being done these days, like using drum libraries or editing to the grid. I mostly understand where they come from. I think one of the reasons is that it's a generational thing, and I respect that. It's a way these people learned how to listen and took as the normal way to do things. Probably they don't hear or feel the same way as a younger person does. An older person and a younger person might have different opinions of what normal is. I believe closing yourself to new things is not a great thing to do. But that's just me. If it works for you, just keep doing whatever you're doing. Because updating yourself is not an easy task, and you might have a lot to learn. And not just musically, emotionally as well. And also being super different might not work for everybody. We're in a constant fight to keep the attention. And that's why some artists choose to stay in the known sounds of today and show their uniqueness in the composition rather than the sound. A general listener might just hit skip on your song, unless they're super open to things. And that's just based on the sound. I think in this era, sound is very much in the front lines because it delivers a feeling. So in my opinion, keeping an open mind is one of the greatest things you can do as a composer or a songwriter or a producer. I think there's nothing wrong with using drum libraries or editing to the grid if the song calls for it. And I think some of my favorite albums wouldn't sound the same using real drums. If your song calls for it, in my opinion, you shouldn't hesitate to use whatever you want to use. Okay, this is it for the first episode of Making Modern Metal Composition Essentials. There's many more on the way. But I have to say, I'm really looking forward to next week's video where I'll talk about the differences between Eastern and Western music. I think that might clarify a lot of things for a lot of people. Let me know your comments and questions down below. And remember to like and subscribe and share this video with your friends. Thanks again. Stay safe. Until next time.